It is the sweltering summer of 1975. We were dropping you immediately into the suffocating, entirely unair-conditioned tracking room of Rockfield Studios in Wales.
Oh yeah, it was an absolute oven in there.
Right. And the very first thing you notice, even before you hear a single note of music, is the stifling heat and the sharp metallic smell of ozone just hanging in the air.
Because of the machine.
Exactly. There was this palpable sense of panic in the room. The band and the producer are staring, completely transfixed, at a massive spool of 2-inch analog tape. It is spooling rapidly back and forth, just back and forth across a metal recording head.
And I mean, as you watch this tape spin, you realize something genuinely terrifying is happening to it.
Yeah, the tape itself, the physical, thick, black medium that is holding all the music, it is literally dissolving.
It really is. The friction is wearing it down so severely that the tape is actually becoming completely translucent.
Like you can see the studio lights shining directly through the tape.
Yeah, the actual music was basically being sanded off the plastic into thin air.
Which is terrifying because the magnetic oxide is the only thing that actually holds the audio signal. We're looking at a literal race against physical disintegration. And the mission of our deep dive today is to figure out why they were intentionally subjecting their music to this completely brutal destruction.
Right, this agonizing analog sweat, this mechanical friction, it was the necessary cost of recording the operatic section of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Exactly. We're going to explore how they built a towering masterpiece while the canvas was literally vanishing before their eyes. You're listening to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
So to understand the sheer lunacy of pushing that 2-inch tape until it was see-through, I mean, we first have to look at the raw acoustic ingredients they were trying to capture.
Right.
When you hear the operatic section of Bohemian Rhapsody, you know, that massive soaring wall of voices singing Scaramouche and Galileo, the natural assumption is that they hired a massive 30-piece choir.
Oh, absolutely. Like, you assume they put 30 people in a cathedral and just hit record?
Exactly. Or, you know, alternatively, using the technology of 1975, they could have easily brought in a polyphonic Moog synthesizer.
Right, just to play those massive chord pads to fake the scale of choir.
Yeah, but they categorically refused. They had this incredibly strict rule against using synthesizers.
Wait, really? No synthesizers at all?
None. They wanted a massive symphonic scale, but they insisted it had to be generated entirely organically. So there was no cathedral choir, there were no session singers. That towering wall of sound is composed of exactly 3 human voices.
Which is just crazy.
It is. Freddie Mercury, Brian May, and Roger Taylor. They committed to a process called manual acoustic coupling.
Okay, let's unpack this manual acoustic coupling thing, because, you know, picturing this completely changes the song for me. They aren't in separate, isolated vocal booths wearing headphones. They are standing shoulder to shoulder, sweating in this Welsh farmhouse, huddled around a single Neumann microphone, probably a U67 or a U87 condenser mic.
Yeah, and that physical proximity, that is the entire secret to the sound.
How so?
Well, a condenser microphone is incredibly sensitive. It is capturing the direct sound waves coming out of their mouths, obviously. But because they are inches apart, the microphone is also capturing the sound waves bouncing off Brian May's chest, colliding with the sound waves bouncing off Freddie Mercury's jaw.
Oh, wow. So the frequencies are physically mixing and interacting in the open air of the room before they even hit the microphone capsule.
Exactly. They're bleeding their voices together in the physical space.
But they aren't just 3 guys randomly singing notes. I want to look at the precise acoustic roles of those 3 voices, because honestly, they function less like singers in a rock band and more like highly specialized orchestral instruments.
Yeah, that is a crucial distinction. Let's look at Mercury first. He is the tenor, and he operates as the absolute center anchor of the acoustic architecture.
Right.
From a purely biological standpoint, Mercury sang with an extremely high vocal tract compression.
What does that actually mean mechanically, though? Like high vocal tract compression?
Well, think of it like tightening the nozzle on a garden hose.
Okay.
By physically constricting the vocal tract, he increases the air pressure significantly before it passes through the vocal folds. And this physical pressure generates an incredibly rich, piercing subharmonic resonance.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it creates a tone that is highly focused and dense, paired with a very rapid, slightly irregular vibrato. So within the choir, Mercury is the fundamental melodic clarity. He is the pillar that the whole sound leans on.
Okay, so he provides the structural integrity, and then you have Brian May flanking him.
Right, May is the baritone, and his vocal mechanics are the exact opposite of Mercury's tight compression.
Really?
Yeah, May's voice is incredibly warm, very breathy, and really rich in the lower mid fundamental overtones. He doesn't have that piercing cut. Instead, in the architecture of the choir, May is providing the crucial lower mid chordal padding.
So he's filling out the bottom end of the vocals.
Exactly. Musically speaking, he is often the stabilizing force holding the 3rd and 5th intervals together right beneath Mercury's melody.
That makes so much sense emotionally when you listen to the track. Like,
Yeah.
May's voice is the harmonic comfort zone. It's the warm bed that makes the chord feel full and satisfying, which I guess allows Mercury's compressed tenor to cut right through the middle without sounding thin or harsh.
You nailed it. And then hovering above both of them, you have Roger Taylor.
Right, the high notes.
Yeah, Taylor takes the high tenor role, and he's frequently pushing up into a soaring falsetto, and his vocal timbre is entirely different from the other 2.
How so? piano?
It's gravelly. It has a high-frequency harmonic saturation to it, like a real cutting edge. He provides the high-frequency acoustic sheen.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, when you hear those peak, piercing falsetto lines that give the choir its brilliant, almost blinding top end, that is the specific biological shape of Roger Taylor's vocal cords.
I love visualizing this. It's like they were mixing primary acoustic colors on a physical palette. Mercury is the bold foundational red. May is the deep, stabilizing blue. And Taylor is this bright, piercing yellow.
That's a great analogy.
By physically standing around one Newman mic, they are bleeding these primary colors together in the air, creating all these secondary and tertiary acoustic colors in real time.
Exactly. The sound is already a complex, unified, living entity the moment it hits the magnetic tape. They didn't capture 3 separate colors and try to mix them into a painting later on a mixing desk. They painted the masterpiece right there in the air, in the room.
Which is beautiful. But having the sound in the room and getting it onto tape are 2 very different realities.
Oh, completely.
And this is where they hit an absolute mathematical wall. Because the math here just isn't adding up for me. If they want this choir to sound massive, they have to stack the voices. Right?
Yes, heavily.
And they've ended up stacking between 160 and 200 individual vocal overdubs. That's up to 200 lead vocals and backing harmonies.
That's insane.
But they only have a 24-track machine. And realistically, half of those tracks are already eaten up by the drum kit, the bass frequencies of the bass guitar, the piano, and the lead guitar. How on earth are they physically squeezing 160 voices onto maybe 10 or 12 open tracks?
Well, they had to use a highly destructive, high-stakes technique called reduction mixing, or in studio shorthand, bouncing.
Explain the mechanics of a bounce for us, because it sounds incredibly risky.
Oh, it is the ultimate commitment. Let's say they have 6 empty tracks available on the tape. Mercury, May, and Taylor will go out and sing 6 distinct vocal harmony passes, filling up those 6 tracks.
Okay, got it.
Now, the producer, Roy Thomas Baker, sits at the mixing desk. He balances the volume, the tone, and the stereo placement of those 6 voices perfectly. He then routes the combined audio of those 6 tracks and records them down onto one single, fresh track on the tape.
Okay, so he collapses 6 distinct tracks into one single mono track.
Exactly. Which frees up the original 6 tracks to be wiped clean and recorded over again with entirely new voices.
Wow. That is intense.
That is the process. And they repeated this reduction mixing over and over and over. To reach that staggering number of 160 voices, they had to bounce the audio across 8 different generations of 2-inch tape.
8 generations?
Yeah, they would bounce a submix, add more voices, bounce it again, add more voices, and bounce it again.
But, okay, here's where I am genuinely confused about the physics of analog recording.
Yeah.
Anyone who grew up with cassette tapes knows the concept of generation loss.
Oh, absolutely.
If you take a mixtape and you copy it to another cassette, the copy sounds slightly worse. If you copy that copy, it gets muddier.
Right, it degrades.
By the time you get to the 8th generation of a copy, the audio degrades into a muddy, hissing, muffled mess of static. It's totally unlistenable. How on earth did they bounce analog tape 8 generations without entirely destroying the audio fidelity of the choir?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the analog degradation you were talking about, the generation loss, it is very real. But in this specific scenario, that limitation actually became the secret weapon of the arrangement.
Wait, the degradation helped them?
Yes. The extreme overdubbing introduced natural acoustic phenomena that acted as an acoustic glue. Things you simply cannot replicate inside a digital computer. Let's look at the mechanics of tape saturation first.
What exactly is saturating, like the tape itself?
Yeah, remember that magnetic tape is coated in tiny particles of magnetic oxide, basically those rust particles.
Right.
Think of them as millions of microscopic buckets that can hold electrical energy. When you push an audio signal onto the tape, you are filling those buckets. But they have a hard physical limit. They can only hold so much magnetic energy before they are completely full or saturated. If you try to pour more volume in, the tape physically cannot accept it. Instead of getting louder, the tape naturally compresses the sound and shaves off the harshest, highest frequencies.
Interesting. But how does that save a choir of 160 voices?
Well, think about the consonant sounds of human speech. If you record 160 human voices singing lyrics, you are recording 160 S sounds and T sounds. This is called sibilance.
Oh, man. 160 people making a sharp S sound all at once sounds like an absolute nightmare of harsh hissing noise.
Exactly.
It would be like a swarm of angry hornets in your headphones.
In a pristine, frictionless digital system, it would be piercing. It would genuinely hurt your ears because the computer would flawlessly reproduce all 160 razor-sharp S sounds.
Right.
But because they were bouncing to analog tape 8 times, the inevitable tape saturation acted as a natural warm filter. The physical limitations of the 2-inch tape literally rounded off and smoothed out that harsh, high-frequency sibilance.
Oh, I see.
The tape simply couldn't hold all that high-frequency energy, so it naturally compressed those piercing S and T sounds into a warm, massive, cohesive breath.
So the physical medium itself was actually mixing the record.
It was.
It was taming the harshness naturally because it physically couldn't reproduce the pain.
That's incredible. But what about the tone of the voices? I mean, why doesn't it just sound like one really loud synthesizer?
That comes down to the physics of phase cancellation. Think of sound waves like ripples traveling across the surface of a pond.
Okay, ripples.
If you drop 2 stones into the pond, the ripples will eventually meet. When the peak of one ripple meets the trough of another ripple, they physically cancel each other out, leaving the water flat. That is phase cancellation.
Okay, I can visualize that. But how does that apply to their vocals?
Well, think about modern pop production. If a producer wants a massive vocal sound today, they will often take one perfect vocal take, copy it, and paste it identically on top of itself 50 times.
Which usually just sounds louder, but also oddly hollow. Like, it sounds like a static, lifeless robot. It doesn't sound like 50 people. It just sounds like one person amplified.
Exactly, because it's mathematically perfect. Every single ripple is perfectly aligned. There is no variance at all.
Right. But Mercury, May, and Taylor were humans. No matter how perfectly they rehearsed, every single time they stepped up to the Newman mic to sing an overdub, there were microscopic biological variations, micro-timing and intonation variations.
Right, because they aren't machines.
Exactly. A human vocal cord might be 2 milliseconds late on one take, or a microscopic fraction of a semitone sharp on another.
Especially because they are exhausted guys sweating in a hot room, trying to hit a falsetto note for the 50th time that day. Their lungs are tired, their throats are strained.
Precisely. And when you stack 160 human performances on top of each other, those micro variations mean the sound waves are never perfectly aligned.
So they are clashing?
In a good way. The peaks and troughs of those acoustic ripples are constantly colliding on the tape. They are naturally phase canceling and constructively interfering with each other at microscopic levels, literally thousands of times a second.
So it's creating this shifting landscape of sound.
Yes. It creates a constantly moving, organic, shimmering texture. Because the phase cancellation is never static, the sound is physically undulating.
Wow.
That biological imperfection is what prevented the massive vocal stacks from sounding like a lifeless synthesizer pad. It sounded like a massive breathing organism entirely because it was built out of human struggle. The imperfections are what made the illusion massive.
That is just brilliant. But, this massive accumulation of overdubbing across 8 generations brings us right back to that terrifying visual from our cold open.
The translucent tape.
Yes, the sheer physical toll this process took on both the human bodies in the room and the machinery trying to capture them.
We really cannot overstate the tension of this process. You have to place yourself in their shoes. They were working 10 to 12 hours a day in that suffocating heat.
For days on end, the physical stamina required from their vocal cords alone is mind-boggling. I mean, belting out lead vocals and dense harmonies at the top of your lungs for 12 hours a day will completely shred your throat. And while their vocal cords are being pushed to the absolute biological limit, the tape is being pushed past its physical limit.
Let's look closely at why that tape became see-through.
Yeah, please.
Because that physical destruction was happening on a machine the band had nicknamed the Fish Fire.
The Fish Fire.
Yeah, it was a Studer A 8024 track recording console. This hulking mechanical beast wasn't just recording audio, it was generating a massive amount of physical heat. The motors, the internal electronics, the sheer mechanical force required to yank that heavy 2-inch tape back and forth for hours on end, it turned the control room into an absolute oven.
Which just adds to the nightmare.
And the tape they were using is simply a thin strip of plastic coated with a microscopic layer of magnetic oxide, essentially rust suspended in a chemical binder. To record an overdub, they have to sing the part. Then they have to hit stop. Then the heavy motors of the Studer machine have to violently yank that heavy spool of tape backward to rewind to the beginning of the section. Then they hit play, the tape rolls forward, and they sing again. Stop, rewind, play, over and over, hundreds of times.
And every single time that tape passes the metal recording head, whether it's going forward or backward, it is scraping.
It's all friction. Every single time that tape dragged across the metal recording heads of the Fish Fire, the physical friction scraped away a microscopic layer of that rust. The actual rust that holds the electrical memory of their voices is flaking off into dust inside the machine.
It's like writing a masterpiece with a pencil that is actively crumbling in your hand. They were literally wearing away the physical medium by the sheer weight and volume of their ambition.
That's a perfect way to put it.
It became a high-stakes race against time. Like if they finished the operatic arrangement before the tape physically snapped, or before the oxide became too thin to hold a magnetic charge at all.
And that danger changes the entire psychology of the room. There was zero safety net. Think about the bouncing process we discussed. Once Roy Thomas Baker mixed 6 tracks down to 1, the balance was baked in permanently.
Right.
If they realized 3 days later that Brian May's harmony was slightly too loud on Generation 2, there was absolutely nothing they could do about it. It was permanently fused into the audio.
Oh, man.
And worse, if that overworked tape snapped under the tension of the motors, or if the oxide flaked off entirely, those 160 perfectly blended, physically exhausting vocal takes would be gone forever.
Because you can't just hit Control-Z to undo a tape snap.
Yep.
It is the ultimate high-wire act without a net. And the grand illusion they managed to pull off while walking that tightrope is just staggering. Through this brutal process, they created the massive illusion of a 36-voice choir.
They really did.
But they didn't just create a loud, flat wall of sound. They took those imaginary 36 voices and they physically staged them for the listener.
Yeah, this is where the theatrical brilliance of the band really elevates the production. They didn't just want the choir to sound big. They wanted it to sound completely three-dimensional. They used the mixing console to physically stage the operatic characters.
When you say stage them, it really sounds like theater blocking, like a sonic diorama.
A sonic diorama is the perfect way to describe it. They utilized extreme stereo panning. The stereo field is just the illusion of space created between your left and right speakers, right?
Well.
On the mixing desk, the producer can route the voltage of a specific track entirely to the left speaker or entirely to the right speaker. So when the choir sings the word Scaramouche, they took that massive block of vocals and panned the voltage hard to the far left.
So it's as if they walked you, the listener, out to the center of a stage, grabbed the characters by the shoulders, and physically placed Scaramouche at the 9 o'clock position. You hear the voices jump out of your left ear.
Exactly. And then the answering lyric, Bismillah, is routed to an entirely different location. They placed that block of vocals at the 3 o'clock position on the far right.
Wow.
And then the desperate overlapping voices crying, no, no, are jumping rapidly back and forth to entirely different locations in the field.
So they are basically placing these imaginary operatic characters on a virtual stage inside your head. If you put on a good pair of headphones and close your eyes, you can literally point your finger to exactly where the different sections of the choir are physically standing in the room.
Yes, they created a sweeping, three-dimensional theatrical scene inside a standard left-right stereo field.
That is just incredible.
They were treating the studio mixing desk not just as a volume control, but as an instrument of spatial architecture. They were manipulating the physical geometry of the acoustic space just as meticulously as they were manipulating the musical notes.
So what does this all mean for us today? When you step back and look at the whole picture, the suffocating heat of the room, the manual acoustic coupling of 3 guys sweating around one single Newman microphone.
The terrifying math of bouncing tracks across 8 generations.
Right, and the magnetic tape literally wearing down to translucent plastic. I mean, it means they achieved a modern digital scale miracle entirely through the sheer brute force manipulation of analog physics.
It proves that limitations are often the catalyst for the greatest innovations. They demanded a massive symphonic scale, and because they categorically refused to compromise, the only way to achieve it was to push the physical machinery and their own biology to the absolute brink of destruction.
Which brings us to a final thought for you listening right now. Think about how we create music or any form of digital art today. Today, anyone with a laptop has access to an infinite number of digital tracks. You never run out of space.
Yeah, that's true.
You can load up a virtual software instrument, click a mouse, and just summon a mathematically perfect infinite 36-voice choir. And you can do it with absolute zero physical friction. There is no heat radiating from the laptop. There is no tape wearing down. There is absolutely no risk of losing a vocal take because the plastic snapped.
Does the total lack of physical friction in modern creation, the lack of a physical medium literally wearing itself down to capture the art, mean we are missing something fundamental in the music?
Exactly. When you remove the danger, when you remove the physical resistance of the fish fryer and the biological exhaustion of the singers and the sheer terror of that translucent tape, are we missing the ghost in the machine that made 1970s analog recordings feel so dangerously electrically alive? It's something to mull over the next time you put on your headphones and hear a choir that sounds just a little too perfect. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe.